everybody. For those of us who are wondering what's going on, we're just allowing everybody to log on. We have quite a lot of attendees today. And just to reassure you that this is the Iraq-Britain Business Council Tech Forum panel, in case you've logged on to another one. Okay. So we're just seeing people log on here, and we'll be ready to start in a minute or so.
Ashley, I sent you a WhatsApp message. Oh, okay.
I saw that. Okay, everybody. I think we're probably ready to start this conversation. I'd like to welcome you to the Iraq-Britain Business Council's Tech Forum panel on what can Iraq do to boost its startup technology. And we have some terrific panelists today. First of all, we'll be interviewing Bilal Qureshi from the GSMA, who's the manager of the GSMA Innovation Fund, and they look at how telecoms globally affect tech startups. Then we'll be moving over to Bassam Falah, who's the chief executive of INNOVEST, who are currently investing in all the startups in Iraq and runs a very big project called Ruad Al-Iraq, she'll tell you more of. Then we have Patricia Letayf, who is operations director of 51 Labs, and they help get startups ready for investment. Finally, but then we move over to Mohammed Khudairi, chief executive of the Khudairi Group and a co-founder of Iraq Tech Ventures, to talk about investors once things have been developed to investment ready level. And finally, we'll be talking to Dawsar Charchafchi, who is chief exec of Media World, who are practitioners and content and digital experts in marketing, and also part of the March group. So we will hopefully be looking at how the whole ecology tracks from startups through to ready investment and how that can strengthen the ecosystem of Iraq's technology. But first, I just want to also say that usefully, 2 days ago, the World Bank published a monitor on Iraq that also talks about the digital transformation of Iraq. And next week, we're going to have a whole session on that. But just to frame this whole conversation by the fact that there are 5 key platforms that they think should be, now is the time to install into Iraq. The first one is really to develop Iraq's digital infrastructure, particularly 5G and access to broadband. Secondly, to strengthen the digital financial services so that financial transactions can occur online seamlessly. Thirdly, to develop digital platforms that includes e-government and also private sector platforms that enable entrepreneurship and commerce. Fourthly, to develop digital skills amongst the population in Iraq, obviously because a lot of young people need jobs, and this is a very strong opportunity for them to evolve into this sector. And finally, to develop the idea of digital entrepreneurship and to spread this more entrepreneurial culture across Iraq. Within that, there are 16 further recommendations in more granular detail that you might want to look at. But for the moment, we're going to be starting off with Bilal Qureshi, who will be speaking for a few minutes. In fact, everyone's going to speak for a few minutes, and then we're going to have a more general discussion. And then finally, hopefully, we will be able to answer some of your questions. So without more ado, I could hand over to Bilal Qureshi. I look forward to your thoughts here. Thank you, Bilal.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you for having me here among very learned audience and very well seasoned practitioners of my fellow panelists here today. Thank you so much. And I'll be very honest, it's my first panel discussion since the COVID lockdown has started. So pardon me if I'm not very well versed with the panel discussion today. Coming to your point of view on how and what needs to be done in Iraq in terms of their moving the needle on digital transformation, especially from the technology perspective, we need to step back a bit, and I think we need to assess that what it means when we say about tech ecosystem, what actually it involves. On a granular level, there are multiple things, but on a macro level, if you see technology on an ecosystem, from an ecosystem perspective, you see there are three basic things. One is how much investment is coming into play. Who are your stakeholders in terms of your customer base? If there is any readiness on that level, what are the digital assets that are already there to help you drive the entire transformation process? So these are the three basic factors, in my opinion, which a country needs to assess before you evaluate their digital transformation journey potential. So from that angle, if we compare that with other comparable market, and if we talk about more Southeast Asian region, which in last year happens to known for technology boom, especially from the startup ecosystem perspective. If you take out examples of Indonesia and Vietnam again, a market of less than 90 million people, and what they have done in last 2 to 3 years is phenomenal. So they have actually witnessed 6 times growth in their tech ecosystem investment and growth in terms of their productivity in last 2 years only, 2018 and 19. So they actually jumped 4 ladders in Asian countries. They were second from the last 2 years ago, and now they are third from top. They're only behind Singapore and Indonesia respectively. In terms of the investment, if you have seen, as I said, they have seen 6 times growth between 2018 and 19. What they actually had was the local talent. There was a lot of technology universities who were producing fresh graduates, and they had good diaspora who was living abroad and helping out their local country. Then they also had favorable economic conditions. They have seen in the last 2 or 3 years, they have seen 7% growth. Macroeconomic growth also always works as a tailwind for digital transformation. We have also observed that they also happen to have a favorable demographics. 60% of them are youth, which is also the case in many of other Asian countries, and in Iraq as well. They have more than, the median age is 20, so it's a very young population in Iraq as well. So you can associate very well with it. The government platform was also provided. There was a national infrastructure that was provided for innovation. Then there was corporate support as well. We have seen that a lot of local corporate entities were investing into startup and technology startups respectively. On the other side, if you see Indonesian market, then they were, the major factors behind their growth was their big local businesses, conglomerates who were family-owned businesses, like palm oil and other real estate businesses and tourism businesses. These guys are now divesting into technology startups, and since last 10 years, we have seen that there were a lot of investment done by those in e-commerce platforms, social media platforms, and ride-hailing services like Grab, which became the unicorn. So those are success factors that I spoke about, which actually worked out for those markets, and it also stands for other similar markets in Asia and even in the Arabian Peninsula. If we talk about that, we can deep dive further in our discussions once we'll get that opportunity, and I'll be happy to answer a few questions on those factors, which have actually helped those countries coming out of a dilemma of what needs to be done to move forward on digital transformation. So happy to discuss further.
Thank you very much, Bilal. Very interesting to see that this can happen very fast. I've seen it happen in the UK over the last 10 years as well. So once you get the constituents in place, things can happen quickly. If I could hand over to Bassam now, who's been looking after and developing young entrepreneurs in Iraq with the universities. Bassam, over to you, please.
Hi. So to start, I will give a very quick preview about what INNOVEST is. We are an investment company that invests in startups in key markets such as Iraq, Lebanon, UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and recently in the UK. As part of our strategy to create shared value in the countries that we invest in, we launch lots of empowerment programs in partnership with governmental bodies as well as non-governmental agencies to empower youth and to create the culture of entrepreneurship in those countries. So in Iraq, we partnered with the Central Bank of Iraq and with the World Bank to launch Iraqpreneurs, Ruwad Laira, which is the first nationwide program that focuses on the startup ecosystem point of market entry. And it's important to explain this point of market entry because we consider it as a cornerstone for any vibrant entrepreneurship ecosystem. So let's say every day one Iraqi wakes up in the morning with a business idea and the motivation to make it happen. So that makes 365 ideas or potential businesses per year. Based on global statistics, maybe 100 out of these 365 will start a business, and out of them only 20 will survive. And ultimately, you'll have one company that has the enough scale and is thriving to be a company that can succeed in attracting investments and provide sizable employment opportunities and thus contributing to the Iraqi economy. So the question is, how could we, rather than have one company, have 10? There are different ways where there are lots of accelerators, incubators, as well as encouraging investments. All these would help. But the lowest hanging fruit and the quickest win is to increase the point of market entry. So rather than having one Iraqi waking every day with the motivation to turn an idea to business, make it 5 and make it 10. And then support those passionate spirits and guide them to turn these ideas into businesses. And then filter them, rate them, segment them, and get them ready, groom them to join the right accelerator programs, the right incubation programs, as well as connecting them with the right angel investors. And that's the core of what Iraqpreneurs Ruwad Laira does. We launched Iraqpreneurs in 2019, and it's a competition platform with 3 tracks: idea track, scale up track, and social entrepreneurship track. It's a 9-month program that empowers Iraqi youth to know how to move from an idea to draft a business plan, and then through the different stages offer them with different empowerment and capacity building programs. Some are online and some are, we do a boot camp, a regional boot camp where the top qualifiers participate in. 2020 was a very interesting year for Iraqpreneurs because it really showed the level of resilience and fighting spirit of the Iraqi youth. If I can, once I was talking about Iraqi entrepreneurs, because again, we get involved with entrepreneurs from around the world. And I was in one of the regional meetings and I said, I don't want any entrepreneur to nag or say the entrepreneurship life is difficult unless you go and try to start a business in Iraq. The challenges that Iraqi entrepreneurs face is 10 times any other country. And going back to 2020, so against all the odds, against the interruption of the internet for a long period, against the corona, we have more than 1,500 fighting spirits, 1,500 participants who managed to, against all odds, against the interruption of internet, against the health securities, to go and participate and aim to turn their ideas into businesses. And for us, this was a very happy surprise. We are closing the participation towards the end of this month, and then we will move into our online training program that all the qualifiers, around 250, will undergo, and this was tailor-made for Iraq. So we managed also to turn a big part of the program from field operation into digital and online. And we succeeded in doing this, and that affected the number of participation. So this is very quickly what we do in Iraq.
So Bassam, has it been successful for you so far? Are you on track for what you expect? And how does Iraq compare with other countries very quickly?
So as I said, the Iraqi youth are hungry for such programs and are entrepreneurial by spirit. So it has been quite successful. We've done similar programs at Middle East level, and participation was almost equal to what came from one country, from Iraq. So participation level is high, and what is important, as I mentioned earlier, is that Iraqpreneurs plays part of an overall funnel. So the graduates of Iraqpreneurs, Ruwad al-Iraq, will be looking for platforms or accelerator programs like 5-1 Lab, like Al-Mahatta, like other incubators and accelerators, grooming them to reach eventually investors. And we're hoping to reach also to attract investments from outside Iraq.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And so handing the baton over to Patricia Letayf from 5-1 Labs, who will take your entrepreneurs and take them to the next stage. Is that correct, Patricia?
Yeah, Bassam, thank you. Couldn't agree more with everything you said. So 5-1 Labs, we are a startup incubator that's based in the Kurdistan region in northern Iraq. We are operating in both Erbil and Slaymaniyah, and we've been there since 2017. Now, what we do is we work with early stage businesses, with entrepreneurs that have a business idea that they'd like to take and turn into a reality. We are currently working with our 5th cohort of entrepreneurs, which we've done in English and in Arabic. So these 10 to 15 entrepreneurs per cohort come to us from across Iraq and also across Syria as well. We have a number of refugees in our programs. And we have learned a lot working with early stage entrepreneurs over the past few years. I'll also talk a little bit about what we're doing now as the ecosystem is evolving. But I had talked to Ashley before about discussing some of the challenges that we've seen that entrepreneurs face, which I think is quite relevant given the World Bank report that has recently come out. I think we have some World Bank colleagues in the room with us, but especially taking tech businesses, which I think is something that's growing in popularity in Iraq given the scalability of them. We've identified a number of challenges, and this is very much from the Kurdistan perspective. But the first, one of the challenges that we see is that online businesses often don't exist on paper. So it's very difficult to register an online business in Kurdistan because the legal framework does not really enable you to say, I have an app, a delivery app, I want to register it. It's very much a mentality of more traditional businesses. You can register a grocery store, but you can't register, your business if it's going to be delivering groceries that don't come from that store. So we're having to find very creative ways to get around these problems. The second, which was mentioned as one of the World Bank's priorities also, is the digital skills gap. So we have a number of amazing organizations in Iraq like Recoded, Preemptive Love Coalition that are really building up the skill level in technology. We have great universities like the American University working in tech, but it makes things more expensive for entrepreneurs. We have seen that some of the highest costs that they bear can relate to finding coders or developers developers to help build these applications. It also costs them time as well if they have to take longer to find coders. In general, costs are high, not only for finding tech talent, but in order to register a business, you have to pay up to $6,000 depending on what your business is. And in a place where your monthly salary is about half of that, that's a large cost. You're also required to have a lawyer and an accountant on retainer, which adds also to your costs. And not to mention just the time that it takes to register, and having to jump from ministry to ministry is a problem. We also are dealing with problems of cash on delivery, which can result in high rates of products not being delivered. And then finally, there's a lot of challenges related to expansion. So registering in Iraq can be quite challenging, and given regulations relating to the finance sector, it's almost impossible to open a bank account abroad or register abroad. So if you're, let's say, an Iraqi company selling Iraqi soaps or handicrafts abroad, how are you going to receive payment? And finally, another challenge relates to investment, which was, I think, one of the main topics of this, which I'll leave maybe for Mo to discuss and we can take in questions. But, the challenge of not only finding investment, but the right type of capital and the right amount of capital, because we've seen a lot of, we've seen larger investors coming in looking to invest maybe $1 million, but you can count on one hand the number of startups in Iraq that can take investments of that ticket size. So we're at 51 Labs, we're trying to work on that a little bit. We've been hosting annual investment trips to Iraq to their, investors from across the US, across the region, just to come see what the pipeline is. Because, innovation is relative, right? Some of the most successful businesses in Iraq are your Amazon of Iraq, your, delivery Kareem type companies. So that's, some of these regional investors come in looking for super innovative ideas. And from my perspective, these are innovative because they're at the front and center of this, this sector. So Mo, I'll leave the investment side for you.
Thank you, Patricia. That is kind of shocked to understand. It costs $6,000 to register a business. It's free in the UK, pretty much. I can't think why that would be the case, but we'll go into that later. Mohammed, over to you, handing the baton over as an investor.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Patricia. Mohammed Khudairi. I'm the managing partner of Khudairi Group and the founder of Iraq Tech Ventures, which was set up to be an investment vehicle to support startups and technology businesses in Iraq. So, from my lens, I'll talk about some of the purview from an investor standpoint. In a macro sense, I think diversification is a must in Iraq. I think what we're seeing right now with the price of oil and all the challenges along with COVID-19, we know and have known that diversifying away from an oil-based economy is a must in Iraq. And the time now is right to do that. So while my day job is running an oil and gas company, I know that the future is going to be a digital economy in Iraq. So with that said, how do we actually do that? I've discussed quite a bit about how do we create Iraq to become a cluster of innovation. And I think it really takes three key aspects, which is the entrepreneurs. And we have people on this panel supporting and developing many of those entrepreneurs. We have universities. We're going to need universities and development organizations like AUIS, Ruwad Al-Iraq, 51 Labs. You really need to give them tools. You need to give the entrepreneurs tools to develop and really build their businesses. As we've touched upon, it's very challenging in Iraq. It's very challenging for any entrepreneur, but let alone the conditions in Iraq are even more challenging. And last but not least, kind of where we come in, in traditional economies, you're going to have VCs and private equity money. In Iraq, it's going to be more of the family corporates, which is, where a lot of the family businesses come in. And I'm really trying to promote and encourage families to kind of start, if you will, investment arms or venture capital arms of their family businesses to look at and support these entrepreneurs. And then that's becoming a lot more popular. Now, some of the challenges that we're facing is also the legislation within Iraq, as Patricia rightly pointed out, and you got a lot of headwinds. And what we're going to need is we're going to need digital, registration, online registration, $6,000 to register a business. I mean, in some areas, it's even more than that, frankly. So that's just too much, and it's too much for entrepreneurs to pay. You're also seeing, and this is unfortunate, but you're seeing kind of limitations to foreign investment in Iraq, and they're making it much more difficult. Legislation came out in September requiring 51% Iraqi ownership, and I know that's to support Iraqi, owned businesses, but you really need foreign money and foreign investors in Iraq to support that. And then last, I mean, these are just a few of the reforms that I've been talking about, which is the tax laws. I mean, I think anybody that does business in Iraq, the tax laws are kind of murky at best. You need clear understanding of what that tax is going to be, so that businesses can properly calculate and understand what their liabilities are. From our side, we have had some success through Iraq Tech Ventures. We closed our first international syndicate investment into Miswag in 2019. It's been challenging since then, but nonetheless, we fundamentally believe that this is an existential challenge for Iraq to diversify away from an oil-based business to a human capital based economy. And I think that I'm glad to see all these panelists and all these attendees joining today to help support Iraq in doing so. So thank you very much. I'll turn it over to Dawsar, to also discuss on the family and investment side.
Hi, my name is Dawsar Charchafchi. I'm the CEO of Media World. We're the master aggregator for Zain Iraq and Jawal Palestine. We basically provide management services for all the service providers for the mobile operators, and also provide core solutions in order to optimize revenue for the operator itself. What I want to kind of focus on is where we trying to kind of, as a company, move away from, like Mohammed was saying, a non kind of oil trade, and more into digital transformation, supporting the small medium enterprises on the ground, which at the moment they need that kind of direction and support in order to sustain their digital and online presence. For them, the most important thing at the moment is being able to communicate to their customers, and that's mainly their challenge, expanding their options for customer reach with different channels and options, and obviously high operational costs. So optimizing the operational costs for them through different platforms that we are actually as a company developing. So it's in order to keep up with the dynamic and fast-paced requirements for them. And in terms of Zain Iraq, our client, I know that they're doing some entrepreneurial work through some of their initiatives. I think that's basically it. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. So just generally, I'd like to throw it out to you to say what can be done to reduce the risk for investors to invest more in Iraq? Is it asking the government to make it a simpler, more straightforward, transparent process? And why do you think the government's not understood this to date? Anybody particularly want to respond to me on that one? Mohammed, perhaps?
Yeah, I'd be happy. Thanks for an easy one there, Ashley. That I'm just kidding. No, the challenge is vast, and I think in fairness to the government, I think they have a lot of other issues going on at the moment in the past 10 years. So it's not, I think it's also a lack of just knowledge and know-how. I mean, a digital transformation is not something that's easy to undertake, but because there's just so many components that are required. It's not just one thing. You can't just bring consultants in and reform and digitize. So I think they've had a lot of other things. I think, I'm going to say this, and I think some people agree. I think oil can be a curse. I really do. I think sometimes that, you know, when you have that much money and that, you know, a plentiful resource, you don't have to look elsewhere. And that's what's happened with the government of Iraq, unfortunately. Again, when you get down to $20 oil, this really becomes, you know, an existential crisis for the government, and saying, hey, what do we do today, and what are we be doing in 20, 30 years when, you know, renewables are online and oil is you know, a less plentiful resource, you know, or less valuable resource. So I think there's a lot of different factors, Ashley, that have gotten us to where we are today. In the past 10, 15 years, yes, they've had a lot of other things, but today, you know, is a new day. We need to take steps. We need to reform. We need to create environments, clusters of innovation, free zones. A lot of different things need to happen. And you got people on this call today, and I'm sure a lot of the attendees listening in that are ready and willing to support the government in doing so.
What's interesting there is that on this call, we've got private sector people who are basically working off your own capital and your own initiative. And on the one hand, the government, you know, we expect governments to do a lot, but often they can just get out of the way and let you get on with it. I mean, there's one rule in not getting in the way, and the other one is just letting you get on with it. And I know we talk very much about family corporates working together. Mohammed and Dawsar, how far do you think corporates could club together and form a sort of bigger group that could possibly drive this forward together?
I think basically through networking, through basically introduction, these kinds of panels are good. You know, having a track record in terms of running businesses and establishing these kinds of relationships are important. First of all, as I said before, being introduced through the IBBC is a good way of being able to start somewhere, and hopefully to put a plan in order to kind of work together on other kind of ways to help other startups.
Quite often it's Mohammed, sorry. I think this is just a really important point, and I want to communicate this, which is this ecosystem, the digital ecosystem, and the investments in these tech businesses are very much. I believe it's very collaborative in nature. Whereas, you know, to be quite honest with you, on an oil and gas contract, only one company can get that, right? Or in a traditional sense, this is one where, you know, Bassam and I are going to co-invest, and you know what? If we co-invest, we're actually helping, we're providing more resources to these. So this is a very unique, I think, ecosystem in that I think we all kind of need each other, and I'd like to enter into an investment with somebody else. So it's very, you know, different than the traditional sense where maybe family businesses are competing and there's only so many resources. I think as the tide rises, we all benefit here.
Bassam, would you like to comment?
Yeah, I would like to comment on what Mohammed said. I totally agree. You know, when sometimes I'm asked who's your competitor in Iraq, I say I don't have competitors, and I genuinely mean it. We look at each and every player in the startup ecosystem as a partner. And recently, the World Bank actually launched an excellent initiative called the Iraq Innovation Alliance that brings lots of the players together. And this is the only way to pass through this very difficult times. So at macro global level, the party is over. Yeah, burning money is not cool anymore. Couple of years ago up until lately, your startup is burning money. That's cool. All you need is to put a nice t-shirt and go on stage and say, yeah, I'm losing money, but I'm building a database. This will not work in the coming period. Many global unicorns are not going to survive the pandemic, and we've heard of many. True that Iraq is a bit far from that scene, but still there will be a halo effect that will reach Iraq. At Iraq level, there will be also challenges because many of the investors, including us, and I'm sure Mohammed as well, we have our cash cow businesses that generate revenue that we use to reinvest in startups. And with most of the businesses globally and regionally and locally are between affected to suffering, this will definitely affect the risk appetite and the capabilities of investors. And entrepreneurs as well as startup ecosystem players have a bigger role to play to make sure that the money is going into the right, well-equipped startups. You were talking about government, also government to be fair during this period while they are firefighting and they are trying to maintain the main brick and mortar businesses that employ thousands surviving. It will be a challenge, but it has to be done. But it will be a challenge to go and convince them, by the way, I'm opening an e-commerce platform or a delivery platform. Although it's very important, and I think initiatives like you're doing are very important. And my suggestion is to include governmental representation in such panels.
Absolutely. Bilal, maybe you'd like to comment from a sort of macro level, the role of governments, the role of corporate families in developing the ecosystems and how they work elsewhere.
Yeah, so we have a very star example of Indonesia, where we have seen 10 of the biggest families who run most of their conglomerates have started their own startup journey. So it all starts, I mean, you have rightly pointed out that what needs to be done to mitigate the risk that it entails. And I tell you, innovation business in itself brings a lot of risk at the first place. And now with the COVID, as Bassam and Mohammed has pointed out, the capital is getting more scarce, and it's no longer going to be a patient one. We need a lot of patience capital when it comes to investing in startups, and that unfortunately becoming scarce because of the pandemic. But I tell you that it also brings a lot of opportunities, as Bassam has also pointed out, that a lot of unicorns will be wiped out, but there will be a lot of challenges coming out, and challenges brings a lot of opportunities. Speaking from the social economic impact investment perspective, which is my day job at GSMA, we do a lot of impact investment, channelizing donor financing for startups. I tell you that social entrepreneurship has a huge potential in countries like Iraq, especially in the post-pandemic scenario. And there's a huge, if not commercial source, but there's a lot of donor source for funding available, which can be channelized and mitigate that risk. Other than that, what these families need to do and what they have done in Indonesia, and what most of the companies who have done in Malaysia is basically they've started in-house. So all of these industrialists.
Could you say that again, please? We just lost the key word you said. What they need to do is to.
Sorry, so they all started in-house innovation. So what that means is that most of these companies who are operating, they have a lot of operation challenges. They have they need to be more cost effective, especially in the post-COVID world scenario. The cost effectiveness will become much more important. To become more cost effectiveness, you do a lot of challenge rounds, hackathons to bring more innovative ideas come into play. So it all started from in-house, and then when you actually gain a lot of confidence on those young entrepreneurs coming with more solutions that can bring a lot of value for you, you start investing into them and going out of your own jurisdiction boundaries. So we have seen in these markets that a lot of ideas which they generated were implemented within their own factories and within their business operations. And then they started greenfield project with more venture capital funding coming into play as well again. So when the local families start investing, that actually makes the grazing ground much more greener, and other venture capital firms from abroad coming in. So as I said, in Vietnam, when they saw 6 times growth of investment in less than 2 years of time, 66% was coming into play from the local investors, and the rest of 34% was foreign direct investment that came into. And the foreign investment also came from South Japan. So why not Iraq? Iraq would be the next Vietnam for when this whole pandemic situation is over, and we set the tools right. And of course, government stability and political will is one of the most key pillar of digital transformation. And I tell you, digital transformation is not just like you're offering something new to the world. It actually offers the same product, maybe in a different channel. For example, financial services today also exist and you're challenging status quo with new payment models because you have new channels. For example, phone is a new channel. So mobile payments becomes a new channel only. You are still receiving the same payment, but a different channel. So digital transformation is not something that is going to change the product value, but it's adding on to that same value that already exists in the market.
Bilal, thank you. That's really good points. Firstly, about the driver of innovation for existing companies. But secondly, you talked about government and the use possibly of social education and healthcare, things that the government maybe can deliver more effectively through digital entrepreneurship. Is that the suggestion there?
Of course. So when it comes to social entrepreneurship, I'm talking about all of those development goals that government tries to achieve. And in the countries like Iraq and other South Asian countries, the developing ones, we have very, very scarce resources, and you have to make a lot of choices, and there's always opportunity cost. So and by investing less and getting more impact is a dream of every government. And I think with digital transformation, that brief can be used, because this is one of the tools, as I said, that with this channel, just think of an idea of telemedicine. In Pakistan, where I live, we have many graduates. So for example, there are like 70% of the graduates who are doctors. Doctors do not come, are not productive. They do not join the formal force of doctors because of various reasons, cultural bindings, because most of them are women. So with the telemedicine platform, that opens up the channel for those women to work from their homes. They're actually meeting their family obligations and also working and being productive. So many startups who have started this and have a very huge success stories. And with this coming into play, government has realized that this is a huge potential, and now they're launching. They in fact launched it today, Pakistan's first national level government-owned telemedicine platform. So a lot of doctors are signing up on that, and the users who are patients can actually talk to those doctors, have a video consultation, and get their e-prescription and get the medicines delivered as well. So this is a huge opportunity from that angle, and the outreach is humongous. If you just compare that, opening up a hospital or even a basic health unit, that costs so many millions of dollars to the government in every corner of Iraq, that will be very, very doable with the use of technology. So that's just one.
Thank you, Bilal. Can I just ask Patricia, the kind of mix of entrepreneurs you're getting through, is there a strong social entrepreneur angle there? And maybe Bassam, maybe like to answer that?
Sure. So I think at the core of entrepreneurship is problem solving. So we always tell the entrepreneurs, unless you're solving a specific problem, then the business won't work. I mean, for example, we have this Corona crisis right now, and some of the businesses that have graduated from our cohort are doing really well. You know, we have one company called Chara Plus that's doing delivery of medication, and they've seen their orders booming in the past several weeks, though I think this also is reflected in these sectors across the world. We haven't specifically worked on social entrepreneurship. We welcome those business ideas if these are types of things that people want to launch. I think UNDP is doing a lot of work in this sector across Iraq as well. And I know there are many initiatives in Mosul, for example, whereby companies are popping up, making masks or prosthetic limbs and things that are really needed in the post-conflict context. Bassam, I don't know if you have anything to add, but Ashley, I wanted to make a point about local investment, but Bassam, I'll leave you to talk about your entrepreneurs first.
Yeah, before saying this, I wanna make a very critical point in relation to the type of startups or type of ideas that the market needs. I gave this example a couple of weeks ago about when there was a war in Lebanon. People stopped whenever there's a bomb, the glass breaks. So people stopped putting glass. They started putting with pins, plastic nylon spreads. And that made the business of pins and nylon spread during the war, it flourished. Everyone started opening a shop to sell pins and plastic. and many people ordered containers of these, and then the war finished, and then you ended up with all these huge. So it's important. The point is, it's important to have tactical solutions for the period now. I see everyone is going into antiseptics and into masks, and everyone now is opening a business to produce masks and bring masks. While that's important, but you need to keep in mind that I'm launching this business for the current period or for the post-corona period, and your business to be sustainable has to be relevant for a longer period. As I mentioned earlier, we have, we're bounded by confidentiality, so we cannot talk a lot about the ideas that are coming through Ruwad Al Iraq, but we are really impressed with some new participants who joined in the past month and came up with ideas and propositions that are very relevant to the post-corona period. I don't think the Iraqis and the Iraq market lacks ideas. To a large extent, ideas are there, and moving them or preparing them, grooming them to become a business is relatively, we know the roadmap of it. The key challenge is to have a funding roadmap. The key challenge is, so while Iraqpreneurs maybe provides the first 10,000 or 20,000, the question is, how could this startup in 3 months have access to 50,000? And even if Mo or INNOVEST come and at certain stage put 200,000 in a startup, the question is, how will this startup get access to $500,000 in 6 months and then to $1 million? You know, many people don't know that companies like Uber are still at burning stage. In Q1 of this year, Uber burned $2.9 billion, and it's already a public company. They've burned since their launch $8-point-something billion. So while the digital economy is the future, we have to be aware that breaking even and turning a business into positive generating revenue business and stop and finish the burning stage is very challenging. And that brings us to a very important point, which is how could we direct the entrepreneurs to launch relative startups and relative ideas, equip them with the tools to bootstrap, because as I mentioned earlier, the party is over, and help them build a funnel through a coalition of Iraqis and institutional international investors to be able to go through the funnel up until they can scale up and become established businesses.
I think, Ashley, if I can jump in about the investment. So, Bassam, I completely agree. I think one thing we're doing right now at 5-1 is trying to determine how to build that pipeline from the bottom up. I think it's clear that there's growing interest among regional VCs in making bigger ticket investments, which, you know, there might not be the supply of. So, you know, if you look at examples like Palestine, I think is an interesting comparison, which is arguably ahead of Iraq, but their local businessmen and women, I hope, played a key role in these investments at the beginning. So one thing we're trying to think about is, you know, it's clear there's tons of money in Iraq. How do we channel it into the right place? You know, this idea of patient capital and having these businessmen and women understand that, you know, it is worthwhile for them to take their capital and invest it in young startups. I think there's very much a mentality, not amongst everyone. You know, Mo, I wish we could multiply you times 100, but I do think there's a kind of an older guard mentality of needing to make, you know, investing in oil and gas is different than investing in a tech company. So how do we shift that mentality? And I think it's quite slow. This is something we're trying to do, you know, maybe to have more matchmaking events or, you know, sorry, Ashley, go ahead. I see you there, but, you know, starting from the ground up.
That's great. I'd like to ask Dawsar actually, because you're looking at SMEs, and on the one hand, you know, you're talking about starting from scratch, but some businesses are in operation and they may be SMEs, and maybe you could rocket fuel them through technology. So you're starting from a base of turnover rather than from scratch. could you see that working well for existing SMEs that want to add a digital component to what they're doing?
Yeah, we are working, we have sort of started to build our own platforms, as I said, in order to enhance their communication with their customer database. This is one of the ways in which we could sort of enhance their business, to be able to communicate to their customers any promotional offers that they want to provide. We can do that through our platforms. And also any marketing tools that they want to use. So some companies don't even have a website. So we're able to host their website, their landing pages on our platform. So this is kind of reducing the actual operational costs needed to kind of keep a business sustainable in Iraq.
Yes, and I'm at the stage where we might just see if there are any questions coming up from. Oh, Mo, go ahead. Yeah.
I see one question. I think it's from Mohammed al-Musawi. I was going to try to address that. I think he says, one general concern stopping the progress of digital economy from progressing is the financial sector and legal framework to operate the investment. How do the panelists see this issue being resolved? Very good question. Major issue. Without clear reform providing safeguard investments. I think Bassam was touching upon this. Listen, I'm an investor. How do I exit my investment? Who's going to come in and what is Uber going to come in and buy these companies, or it's another major? So that's a major challenge that still remains. Iraq's legal framework is not clear. Not a proven precedent and all that. So this is a major issue. I don't necessarily know if I would like to promote this long term, but in the short term, what some companies have done is they've domained offshore. So you can go through ADGM and Abu Dhabi or other areas, set up the entities there, so the actual ownership and the IP sits there, and then have investors come in through that channel. Again, I would love to see Iraq, set it up so that you're doing direct investments in Iraq. But in the short term, that could be a short-term solution for investors looking to set up.
Does Iraq have an offshore effective platform in the way that the UK might have the Channel Islands and the bots and all those? I mean, does the same thing exist in Iraq at all? An offshore?
I mean, you have Coral Zubair free zone, but that's not not set up for this type of set. It's for traditional industrial businesses. So no, it doesn't have that. I've seen plans and discussions around it, but they need to accelerate this. They really need to don't reinvent the wheel. Go see what other places like the UK, the US, even the UAE have done, and copy that for now and set up that.
One simple thing would be to have a sort of tech investment free zone in Iraq, and that would just allow money and talent and whatever to come through. Is that? That
would be a start, I think. Yeah.
Okay. We got one or two other questions. This offshoring one, Patricia, I think it was aimed at you earlier, about owning the IP offshore in the UK and then effectively owning it elsewhere other than Iraq. Is that something that might appeal to you?
We haven't really thought about kind of this related to IP. It's a challenge because you can't necessarily protect an idea. So we always tell the entrepreneurs that your idea becomes unique by making it original and adding different bells and whistles. We haven't really ever told anyone to register it elsewhere. They can't really trademark it. And I think anyway, protecting the ideas can be quite challenging legally in Iraq, though it's something, we'll look into. So thanks for the comment.
I just want to thank you. I want to also mention that Dr. Ali Shabazz from Northampton University, who are one of our members. And by the way, Dawsar's IBBC member, as is Mohammed. So thank you for joining us. Dr. Ali says, digital transformation strategy for Iraq is needed now. The private sector NGOs should play a major role in developing such a strategy. Currently, a group of Iraqi technologists are working together to develop it. Feel free to join us in this project. We need input from investors and entrepreneurs. So it's Dr. Ali Shabazz, Research and Innovation Leaders at University of Northampton. There's a nice little advert for him there. I'm just looking for other questions that might come through. Are there any other things that we haven't talked about? Dawsar, you mentioned to me the YPO actually as an opportunity to connect Iraq, not just in itself, but beyond to other leadership families.
Yes, I joined YPO actually last year. I joined the Jordan chapter, which basically has been, I mean, I just sort of joined, so I haven't had, for example, like other members, a lot of, time. But what I wanted to say is that these kinds of organizations gives members access to courses, business development courses, personal development courses. You get to know other family companies, family businesses that are running all over the Middle East. And it's a great networking opportunity. And I think actually we should, come together and do a chapter in Iraq.
YPO,
my brother and I started the YPO Iraq chapter last year, so it's ongoing. We've got a call actually on the 13th, though, so I didn't know you were a YPO member. I'm part of YPO Dubai, and so I'd welcome anybody interested. I'll send you the link. We've got a call. I think somebody from your family was at one of the lunches we hosted in Dubai. But I agree, it's a great resource. A lot of learning tools. Like-minded individuals coming together for a good cause. So I'm going to plug YPO Iraq. So we're trying to get the chapter moving. We've got, I think, 11 members today, and we're hoping to increase that. So anybody interested, please reach out to me.
Mo, can I just say, what does YPO mean?
It's Young Presidents Organization. So it's there's some hard requirements and soft requirements to join, but it's a group of 26,000 members globally. It's the largest professional organization out there, and so it's a good resource. So yeah, thanks for plugging that, Dawsar. We would love for anybody interested to reach out to us and have you guys join.
We've got a question from Mr. Wahid Kasir. I don't know if Mr. Wahid would like to say something. Maybe Agni could tap him in. He's got an interesting angle here on Islamic banks. Is that possible? Mr. Wahid Kasir, would you like to ask a question and put your point about the Islamic Bank in Iraq?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. Certainly, I think Iraq has potentials to house itself a new Islamic bank that focuses on particularly the retail, the SMEs, and the commercial side of the banking. And I think that's where we can focus on the project finance, trade finance, and the corporate finance as well. But I think the key challenge I see there is that if the inward investment climate is not that receptive, then the investors will be quite hesitant to come into Iraq. And moreover, I think repatriation of capital, as some of the panelists have highlighted, that's going to be the key challenge as well. So unless there is a clarity and there's a absolute assurance and guarantee from the government that can be relied upon, I don't think the investors will be motivated to come to Iraq.
Thank you. If you were to do your bank, Wahid, would you make it highly online-based only, for example?
Well, I think both the options can be looked at. Obviously, the digital one is much more cost-effective, and I think that can be set up pretty quickly as well. And I'm looking at that for other jurisdiction as well. Apart from Islamic banking, obviously, I've been focusing on some other areas as well, such as corporate finance, and also doing a first Islamic credit card platform as well.
Thank you very much. If I could, Razmi Al-Jabri, our director in Iraq, is raising his hand here. Razmi, have you got a question you'd like to ask? Agni, can you tap Razmi in?
Razmi,
Hello,
please
Razmi?
activate your mic.
Yes, it's now. Do you hear me now?
Yes, Razmi. Please ask away.
Yeah, start with I have to thank the speakers for their excellent speeches, really, and especially Mohammed Al-Khudairi. How are you and your father? Are you okay? Good. I have to comment or to ask Patricia if she has any challenges in Kurdistan. She mentioned. I really strangely, because I think everything is going smoothly in Kurdistan, and especially in the investment. They have very, very good, excellent investment commission. So if, as IBBC, we always, if there is a problem, we always come in. So if you have a problem, just drop me a line, take my address from Ashley, and I will come in to solve it.
Thanks.
Yeah, and I hope in Iraq, after the new government is solved, I am very hopeful that we have a lot of changes happens, especially in the development of Iraq. So I cannot talk about it now, but it comes later. But as in Kurdistan, because I live in Kurdistan, so I could help. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rasmi. We'll take it offline, but we'd love to meet you in person.
Thank you.
Mr. Karam Sarida is also interested to join your YPO chapter, Mohammed, just to let you know. I'm just going through all the questions here. Bilal, is there something you wanted to say?
Actually, I have to step out. It's a time for me to break my fast, actually. So
okay. Yes, thank you very much. It is 3 o'clock. We've been on it an hour. I think maybe we'll begin to wind down unless anyone would like to raise a particular question.
There are a few hands from Saad, Saraf, and Faris Dean.
Okay. I think some of the questions may have been asked, but yes, okay. Should we just quickly have those 2 questions? Thank you. Over to you, Agni.
Okay. I just wanted to ask basically a number of issues for tech startups in Iraq. And I think, Patricia, I met you in London Business School last year. We've talked about your experience. The availability of good quality talent seems to be an issue. So you need, basically, when you do a startup, you need to develop things from the ground up compared to the UK, where there are, specialists in every little bit that you can get freelancers parachuted in straight away. And 2 is the legal framework. What sort of law are we following in terms of when it comes to, developing contracts with investors and, is there anything, what sort of framework? And 3, broadband, and where are we in terms of penetration there as well?
Sure. I think I might, one of the interesting points regarding the challenges, Saad, I'll send in the chat box a link to a report we wrote about registration, and you can see some of the challenges. There are a number of case studies, especially when it comes to defining your business as a tech startup. Regarding the framework for documentation, I think, Mo, you've talked about this before, that one of the challenges or one of the aims is that we develop a framework for investment when it comes to Iraqi startups. So I can hand off to you if you'd like, maybe talk about Miswag.
Sure. Yeah. In terms of legal, framework on the contracts. What we did when we did our investment, we based it on kind of U.S. norms, if you will. That was a bit challenging, to be honest with you, Saad, because you also have to couple it with the local laws in Iraq. So when investors are coming in, you have to take both into account. So what we try to do as much as possible, we had U.S. lawyers drafting it and then send it to our local lawyers in Iraq to make sure it's relevant to Iraqi law. Now, the second part of this, if I can, take us down a bit of a rabbit hole. So once we raised $500,000 from several investors, including ourselves. Once we actually finalized it, we're trying to get the funds to the company in Iraq. they went to the bank and said, hey, here's the investment amount, and you know, we're expecting this. It took us about 4 months to actually get the money transferred into the banks in Iraq, because they were like, they just didn't compute for them what was happening. That, you know, they're looking at the nominal capital of the business, which is $50,000, and saying, why are they sending you $500,000? So, you know, the actual legal framework and the actual practice of getting funds there are many challenges which need to be you know, resolved. So I think you bring up a really good point, Saad. And if I could just, you know, I know we're slowly winding down the call, Ashley, and I know I always kind of call you out on this, but I really want action. I want us to use these discussions and put down action points that allow us to go to the government. IBBC is very well-known organization, and I would like to use that platform to go to the government and say, please listen to us, take action. We need to do 1, 2, 3, 4, and setting up a legal environment, legal framework to allow investors and entrepreneurs to conduct business with greater ease is essential. I must admit that a lot of times within our business, we try to avoid the government as much as possible. I'm sure a lot of businesses and people on this call do the same. I respect the government. We just don't want them in our business. And this is not one of those situations. We cannot avoid the government. We have to work hand in hand with the government. They must set this up, or otherwise we're not. It's going to happen. It's a matter of, is it going to happen in 10 years, 20 years? Is it going to happen in the next several years? It's going to happen. So, you know, I would like us and IBBC to be at the forefront, making that change a reality.
Thank you, Mohammed. I may now start to not ask any more questions, as we're literally about to conclude. So I'm sorry if I haven't asked all the questions up there. Maybe people can follow up offline. But I take what you're saying, Mohammed. We actually now have a government we can talk to. So that's a good start. And I think it's quite likely that we will want to bullet some points and pass them on in our own way, which you'll be very much a part of that. At this stage, I'd like to really thank all of the spokespeople today. Dawsar, thank you so much for spending your time with us and giving us your insights into SMEs and the networks you're creating. Patricia, thank you for your wisdom on the KRG and for all the work you're doing to develop entrepreneurs for investment readiness. Bassam, thank you so much for your patient capital and your support for the wider ecology, absolutely invaluable. And Mohammed, thank you for your great insights, your knowledge and your corporate head and your personal investment into this whole area. So I hope firstly that this would encourage people that are watching in to speed up and support everyone here that's doing their own thing individually almost, to give them support, to collaborate capital together. I think that was a real win for me, to encourage the corporate families to do their own investment and their own innovation, and to encourage the government to do the same. And also to say that there's a lot to be done. But next week, we have got the World Bank talking about the digital transformation of Iraq. So I hope you'll all be able to log on then. You'll all be invited. Do come and ask some questions. I think it's going to be quite significant conversation because they are making recommendations on their own level to the government. But I think we probably should as well at IBBC. So just to say thank you. And finally to say, if anyone's interested in sponsoring these series, then we'd also be very interested to hear about that. Obviously, our physical conferences are no longer able to be applied at the moment. So we're doing these online information panels and conferences, and obviously we need some support from that. So if anyone's interested, we're open for business. Thank you all so much, and maybe see you all next week.
Thank you, Ashley. Thank you very much for hosting us.
Thank you,
Great to see you all, and stay well.
Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Thank you,
guys.
Ashley. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye, guys.